I'm hyped,
Hello.
dude.
Super hype, right? It's because I am so excited for today's session. Today, I am joined by a true architect of modern sales, the modern sales landscape, Mark Kosoglow. Mark is the Chief Revenue Officer at Docebo. It's the enterprise AI learning platform. But I've always known Mark as a category builder. He was the first sales hire at Outreach, where he scaled the company from its earliest days to a multi-billion-dollar unicorn. He also served as CRO at Catalyst Software, and he is one of the most vocal advocates for professionalizing the sales craft. Mark, it is great to have you here today.
What up, JD?
So, for the people watching who haven't followed your journey today, give us a quick version of, what you're building right now and what's consuming your mind these days.
Yes, I'm entering in my fourth quarter at Docebo, so almost a full year in. And right now, I'd say like the biggest thing I'm focusing on is making sure that we have two things in place. One is an operating model. What is the way that we structure the customer journey? Who are the people that are in charge of the parts of it? How do we measure each part of it? And how do we make sure that it's the most connected journey in SaaS? And so that's the hammer that I pound every single day, is talking about our customers should feel like they're going from friend to friend to friend. That's getting more and more and more value as they go through our customer journey. And then the second thing is I am really dead set on operational rigor. And how do we make sure that every day we're following the processes that we've all agreed to, that we've all been trained on, to do things in a consistent way that gives us consistent data that we can now feed into AI and other analytics platforms in order to make sure that we are running the business in a way that makes the most sense and delivers the best outcomes for the inputs that we're putting in.
I love it. Those are both kind of core management principles that I think have been great forever and ever and ever. Having great human connection and great customer relationships, and then having a repeatable process. But you've also been talking a lot about how AI helps support you in that. And I've been reading a little bit about your GTM Brain. What is that all about, and how does that fit into the story?
Yeah, so when I got to Docebo, we had a very high functioning, maybe not high, but we had a strong BDR team that was delivering good results. But I had spent some time before this trying to do a startup. And entrepreneurship wasn't my cup of tea. I prefer being an operator over being an entrepreneur. And so I had been exploring, though, the space of how do you make sure that you do outbound more effectively. And so I brought a lot of the concepts and ideas of what I was going to do in my startup to here. And what that looked like was finding someone, and I partnered with User Gems, which is typically known for champion tracking, but that's only like 5% of what they do now. And together we built what I call my outbound brain. And my outbound brain is basically a system that looks at, 15 to 20 different signals that we call stacking of signals. So it'll look at for a bunch of signals at the prospect and the account level. It will score each one of those signals. And then it takes all of the scores of all those signals against each prospect and account and creates an overall, what I would call like a convertibility score. And that convertibility score is then used to push the 25 most convertible prospects each day into each BDR's queue. They're put into the right sequence, and then the emails are written by the AI, the manual emails. And then what the BDR does is they come in every morning, they look through their 25, they read the emails, make sure everything looks good, sounds like them, and then they complete the first task, which then starts the rest of the sequence and outreach to go through, and they then move on to their cold calls and the other stuff that they're doing. But basically, what it does is there's 5 main decisions that my VP of BD thinks are the foundation of strong outbounding, which is 1, can you pick the right account? 2, can you pick the right persona? 3, can you pick the right messaging for that persona? 3, can you pick the right cadence of messaging? And then lastly, is your CTA or your offer good enough to get someone to respond? And if you make those 5 decisions consistently well, you'll have consistently good results. And my outbound brain for over 70% of my BDR activity makes all of those in a consistent, best data-based way, so that now the other stuff my reps are doing is a little bit more nuanced, and we're trying to figure that out so we can bring it over too. But like that's what the outbound brain is doing right now.
That's really cool. So, a lot of people are talking about using AI to automate a lot of kind of fundamentally human or sales processes. As you start using the GTM brain to support your BDRs, is the individual BDR more important or less important as a sort of a cog in a machine that's pushing the button on the next step?
I think they're more important, but I think what we've done is we've relieved them from decision making that is so multivariant and complex, and able to be either shortcut or done incorrectly, even if it wasn't intentionally. That they can now focus on the things that I think humans do best, which is making connections and fostering relationships and getting people in the right frame of mind. Like as an example, like I have a couple friends that are using AI to make cold calls or to interact with humans. And maybe I'm a little behind, but I'm not there yet. I don't really want to, like, if you were an AI interviewing me right now, I wouldn't be super interested in that.
Yeah.
And because I'm old, but I don't mind getting an email written by an AI that's chosen me as a good company because of these factors, and then written an email related to those factors. I'm fine kind of starting the conversation that way. And I think that done correctly, a business benefits greatly from the consistency and the rigor and all that stuff that the AI will do. But once the reply is in the inbox, I kind of want a human to make the decision there.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. And thanks for the comment in the comments I'm reading. Dominique says it's refreshing to hear about such a well-structured pipeline building strategy for BDRs, giving them clear starts and finishes and not just endless loops and cadences.
Well, JD, like most BDRs come in, they grab their cup of coffee or whatever they do in the morning, if it's in the office or at home. And the first thing they sit down is they say, what do I need to do today? That's your first trigger that you don't have a high functioning BDR team, is the looking for what work to do. Then the next thing they usually do is like, well, I'm going to go to my calendar and my email and my Slack, because those things can tell me what to do and they're easy. That means right away, you're not, again, another sign you're not a high performing BDR org, because you're in a reactionary position, not a proactive, what do I need to get done today that helps me with results. Yet I'm reacting to the stuff that's being thrown at me, whether it's important or not, because at least then I feel productive. And then the third thing is they'll start to then be like, okay, well, what accounts am I going to go after today? And now we've taken down a whole rabbit hole of research and wasted time, when the buyers are putting out the signals. You just have to understand what signals you need to listen to, and then stack rank those, give them each, weight, some convertibility, and then use all that to create kind of the brain that we just talked about. So when my BDRs walk in the morning, the first thing they do is they look at their 25 people in sequence and they get all that done. And now that's the most important thing a BDR can do, is find new people every day that are highly convertible, put them in the right sequence, and get that thing started. There's no questions about what to do. That's just what they do. And we have some real rigor around the activity blocks too that I could talk to, that helps make sure that those activities are happening.
Yeah, I'd love to hear you talk about that. And especially one of the things that I've been kind of wrestling with is, historically, the BDR role or SDR role has been sort of that entry level into sales. And sometimes I think doing the account research or doing all of that drudgery, help them build up a muscle and some business context. It sounds like now you're able to just throw BDRs right into fairly well qualified conversations that maybe need a higher level of skill and business acumen and connection. So
possibly, yeah.
So I'm curious, what do you think about what's your training for the entry level seller to the org, or is there something different that you need to be interviewing for or screening for when you're hiring a BDR into their first sales job?
Yeah, so I hire very differently. Or my interview process and the way that I make sure that I hire correctly, I think is very different. I do not check for skills. Like I'm never going to ask anybody to do a sample discovery call or a sample demo or create a deck for me. Those are all things actually that probably I have a perspective on how I want them to be done. And I'm going to have to unwind whatever they know anyway to get them to do it the way that I think is best. What I hire on are traits. Traits are innate parts of your personality that define who you are as a person and are very difficult to change. For example, I want hard workers. So I have to interview to figure out if you're a hard worker. I want curious people. I want coachable people. And so what I do in interviews and when I'm hiring is I look to try to activate those traits through my interviews, and they either show up or they don't. If they don't show up, then I don't believe they have them and they don't get hired. If they show up and at the right level, then that person's an easy hire for me. And so I don't think that a BDR needs to learn how to research an account anymore. I think that's a skill. I can teach anybody that skill. I can give anybody an agent to do that skill. So I think it's probably antiquated business acumen that's not required anymore. What's required is, am I curious enough that when I read the brief, do I go look at the parts I don't understand so that I can understand it, so that I actually know what I'm reading? That's the trait I'm looking for, not the skill of, can you go to LinkedIn and then can you do this and then can you do this, and these series of tasks that are now honestly going to, if not already obsolete, will be obsolete the next year.
Yeah. I just finished researching a book on AI and sales, and kind of the conclusion that I landed on is exactly what you said earlier about, I don't want an AI person to interview me. I don't want a fake person on the other end of my sales call. I think there's a place for humanity in things like trust building, relationship building, perspective taking, all of those kinds of, soft skill, liberal arts kind of things. But it does strike me when I hear you talking that if the SDR is not doing all of that, routinized stuff, we've really got to get those great liberal arts folks and really great communicators into the seat, because I think you used to move up the ranks because you were the person who could pound the phones 100 times a day and just like through sheer will. And now it's maybe a little bit more nuanced or a higher level of thinking or skill.
Yeah. Again, skills are all teachable to me. Like I can teach anybody to be good on the phone. I just want to know, when you're on the phone, are you naturally curious or not? You know what I mean? When I say, oh yeah, you know what? My pipeline gen is down 20%. Are you like, oh, okay, this is a qualified candidate? Are you, or do you say, well, what does down mean? Does that mean like it's a trend? Is it 1 month? Like I hear down a lot. That doesn't, like, give me a little more color. That's the person that wins now to me, not the person that can ask a single question because they know it's a question they should ask, or they've learned that it's a question that gets them information. I think as everybody has more and more data, your understanding of the nuances and context of that data, and understanding that humans in general, like when I say a sales accepted lead and when JD says sales accepted lead, we actually have a 30% variance in what we mean. I want to know what that 30% variance is so that you and I can speak the same language.
Yeah. So you started to kind of tease a little bit earlier. You've got kind of activity blocks. Maybe there's metrics that we have to align on. What does that look like for you in this kind of new world of sales?
Yeah, we do 2 activity blocks a day. That's nothing groundbreaking. But what we do in those activity blocks is we have managers sit with the reps for 15 minutes during each block. So twice a day, a manager will sit with a rep and watch and observe what's getting in their way of doing work. When are they making poor choices? When do we feel like there's gaps in like the skill level that we need to up level, since we know these people have the traits that we want? And so they then use that to fill out some information. And then we use that then to analyze, for example, what's going wrong and keeping somebody from doing all the activity that they need to do. And so a good example of this is recently we weren't getting through all of our phone calls, especially in the European team. And what we found out was, well, they had called the same number multiple times. A lot of times when they got to the call, they knew it was bad. And then they were spending 5 or 10 minutes, like either doing administrative work to change the number, figure out the number, mark the number as bad, move the person to another sequence. And that was taking up so much time, they couldn't just do calls. So we did a test, and in 2 weeks switched data providers, and we freed up like, X number of minutes per call or per call activity time, because we eliminated a bunch of bad data. It wasn't about our connect rates. Our connect rates weren't bad. It was just that what we were doing with the bad numbers was the process wasn't clear, and this new vendor created a much easier process for our reps to just kind of do what they needed to do to keep cranking on calls and not like try to go find the right number or have to do a million steps to mark it as a bad number.
Yeah, I think AI is bringing us lots of efficiency when it's built on great data. And when you've got bad data, we're just multiplying, stupidity. I just gave a TED talk about my garden in the back. I had put up a little Facebook page announcing it as like this exciting new bistro, the Chicago Bell Garden, like just like a joke of friends. But there's a spice vendor actually in London who, had some sort of a bot looking for new restaurants opening in the States, saw that there was this exciting new garden and sent me 120 pounds of steak rub as a sample. And, I had vegan meat people coming, delivering, calling and trying to deliver samples, cases of vegan cookies and all of these things. So, I think AI has really let this scale really, really fast. But at the end of the day, it's got to be built on a really truthful foundation. How do you make sure that you're running your business on, you talked about phone numbers, but what about forecasting and the rest of running your business? What are the core sorts of bits of data that are important to you, and how do you make sure that they're valuable?
Yeah, listen, it depends on the function you're talking about, since you and I are both revenue leaders, not sales leaders. So the way that I think about it structurally is I subscribe to Winning by Designs and Jocko van der Koege's recurring revenue operating model, which is basically the bow tie, which, I think doesn't take a genius to understand that. What I've done is I've simplified his just a touch, in that I have 6 areas that I consider the areas of my customer journey. And I have a person that's in charge of each of those areas as the steward of that part of the customer journey. And I require 3 things from that person as the steward of that part of the customer journey. So let's say that we're at selection, which is where like my VP of sales lives. I expect them to have a forecasting process that tells me, what are they going to deliver to my onboarding team? Even more importantly not more importantly, but I need to know where the numbers are going to land, like what our forecast is. But they're a neighbor to implementation. And so are they forecasting to implementation in a way that implementation can plan correctly so that we can give a best in class customer experience? So forecasting methodology. The second is a governing process in sales. That's your sales process, so your sales stages. And then the last thing I expect is what I call the manager rep operational rigor. And in sales, we call that the deal review, which is a weekly meeting. And so that's my 3-legged stool that creates stability in sales. I have that in implementation. I have that in CS. I have that in BD. And so I'm a very much of I wouldn't say contrarian, but having lived the life of many of these people, I feel like I understand where these processes have sucked in the past, and I'm not afraid to reimagine them a bit. And so I have a very specific way I do forecasting, and I could talk you through that. I have a very specific sales process that I've spent years perfecting that is built to be very buyer-centric and not seller-centric. And then I have a prescribed, scripted way that I expect deal reviews to be done. And I'm so maniacal about that every one of my sales managers sends me 2 recorded deal reviews a year that I personally coach and send them feedback on and score on. And I think that's the most important meeting in my sales org every single week. And so I make sure that those are being run to the letter of how I expect that script to go, because it accomplishes 3 things when you do that. 1, I get to drive the process of how things work into my rep's brain by coaching on the process, because I get to see the process because it's a result of the data, which is the second thing. Make sure all my data is right so that I can actually pull a report out of Salesforce and make meaningful strategic decisions on it, because the data is accurate. But the data is accurate because we've constantly reinforced the process that creates that data. And the last thing is the rep leaves with a set of to-dos that they can do in every deal that week that is agreed upon with their manager that does 2 things. 1, it moves the deal forward. It makes it more mature, so it moves it through our sales process. And 3, it mitigates risk, which makes it more forecastable. And we do those things in parallel, whereas most reps do them sequentially.
The social scientist in me loves this because it's a repeatable process that you're constantly refining. And when something good happens, even if by luck, you're identifying what was lucky so that you can do it again and make it part of the best practice instead of just, celebrating and moving on.
Yeah.
It seems to me that you have gotten a really sophisticated process here. And as we were getting ready to start this call, you also said to me, I said, oh, I want to talk about AI. And you said, I've just rewritten my whole AI stack. Tell me a little bit about what that's all about. Is it supporting this process or something else? Or, what does that look like for you?
Yeah. So I have 2 kinds of buckets of AI, general buckets. One is like the company stuff, right? Like, what do I like my outbound brain? That is a part of a workflow of a rep. And I consider that like a corporate that to do your job, you have to do this. The other stuff is the stuff for me, like what makes me a better employee, a better CRO. And so that what I'm trying to do with my own personal AI stack is I watch a lot of YouTube videos from people I trust on Claude and Co-work and how that all works. And I've had like maybe 3 bumps up. And my most recent one was actually this weekend, where I took about 6 weeks of research and saving videos and all that kind of stuff. And basically what I've done now is I've decided that my personal AI operating system is Co-work. It's not agents, it's not the chat, and it's not Claude Code. It's Co-work. Co-work allows me to create what I call a workspace. So basically, before I was doing this setup, I'd have to retype stuff. If I changed a prompt, it was it might miss something that I needed to put in there. And I had a bunch of like keyboard shortcuts where I could type like / master and it would put in like a master prompt to kind of give me stuff. But then it was, there's too much to type. So what Co-work does, or what Claude does is, there's this claude.md file, which is a plain text called markdown file that basically is, these are the hard and fast rules that I can never break. And those for me might be like, a good example is that somewhere recently, AI introduced a term into my business called ARR compression. I hate it. ARR compression, that's called a decrease in ARR. All right, let's not overcomplicate things with fancy words. So one of my hard, fast rules is never use the term ARR compression. I hate it, right? So there's a bunch of stuff like that. Then there's another thing called a memory.md file. That's another plain text markdown formatted document that basically is, these are the things that are rules, but they change. Like, for example, my Q2 ARR number, that's it, but next quarter, that'll be a Q3 number. So that memory needs to update, or let's may say that we reforecast or something. Those are things that are like conceptually important, but can have variability to them versus never use ARR compression as a rule. And then I have a resources folder, and a resources folder is basically a place where I put canonical documents or examples of things that I need the Claude to reference to understand how to do well, right? So for example, I might put in like my forecasting methodology document in there. I might put an example of like, this is the best CEO memo I ever wrote, right? So now I have that. And what I do now is each project, or it's not really a project, but I create workspaces, which are general areas where I work. Like, for example, when I do pipeline reviews, I might do a pipeline review workspace. And that also has a Claude file, a memory file, and a resources file. And what that does is it creates efficient token usage. It allows me to have granular roles that Claude and Co-work work inside of when I'm doing very specific things like forecast reviews, or we just created an acquisition and I want to make sure that that acquisition is performing correctly. I have a workspace just for that my Claude MD file and my memory MD file and my resources are all specific to that thing. It doesn't need to look at that when I'm doing like a regular pipeline review or I'm doing my OKRs. It doesn't really need to access that. So it's cordoned off in that workspace. And then I put the projects that need that kind of information inside of that workspace. And so that's kind of how that's the new setup. And then what I do after each session is I have an audit skill, and that skill then looks at my session and it says, these are the new skills that I think that we need to build. This is the new mandates that we need to put in Claude MD. These are the new things that we need to update in memory. And then it does that I do that every single day after I get done running my sessions. And so every day, the things that I do, especially the things that I do that need to be more deterministic, that need to be more rigorous, they're getting better every single day based off of how I interact with it and the feedback that I give it each time. It's pretty crazy.
It's super sophisticated, and it sounds like it's working really well for you. I'm also kind of balancing in my mind. There was a Pew Research study at the end of the year last year, so 6 months old already, that said, the majority of American workers hadn't even touched AI in their professional lives today. So if you're a CRO listening to Mark talk today who hasn't started down this process of building their own, GTM Brain or AI workspaces for all of these things, are they already too late? And what's their first step to get started at getting better?
No, I don't think you're too late. I mean, listen, it's like, is it too late for you to learn how to do pivot tables in Excel or Google Sheets? No. Are you behind? Yeah, but it's not too late. So get caught up. I'd say this is the main thing is like, I'm going to blame my 16-year-old for this, but my leisure time went from kind of watching Netflix stuff and sports and a few things like that to YouTube. Mm-hmm. And once it got put over into YouTube, I started getting different types of content that I find equally as interesting as that new Netflix show, but that are much more professionally beneficial. And so I might watch like a couple Claude videos a day that are 10 or 15 minutes each. And when I see one I like, I save it. When I get back to my computer, I then take that link and I pop it in Claude and I'm like, hey, get me a transcript of this. Tell me what I learned, and like create a Notion note. Or I have a thing on my phone where I use Notion as kind of like my second brain, where I store things that I really like or inspiring or novel or interesting to me. And I just, hit the share button, put Notion as my share sheet, pop it in there. Notion's running AI summaries. Those AI summaries are now in a database inside of Notion. And then every day I actually do this. This is a weird thing I do when I process I have the AI every day look through all of my open Asana tasks. And then it says, okay, for these tasks, here's the things in your second brain that are new or interesting ideas that you've recently highlighted that you might be able to actually apply to completing this task. And so like now I'm like not just thinking about what do I know how to solve this problem. I'm bringing in, here's 2 LinkedIn posts I read last week related to this problem. And maybe I can apply these right now and learn and evolve myself. And so like that's what I'm doing. But the main thing is get on YouTube, watch a few Claude videos. It'll be in your feed. Whenever you see something you like, just take a few notes and then pop those notes or take down a URL, pop that into Claude and be like, hey, I want to use this. How do I use it? I think that's the main thing people don't understand about AI. It's not like Excel, JD, where you had to like pound out equal, VSpan or whatever, VLOOKUP.
Yeah.
And I had to watch a million. You can say, I want to do this, but I don't know how. Can you help me? And it'll do it. It'll help you.
Yeah.
And it's like having a tutor sitting right next to you that's like helping you do stuff.
I love it. I'm also going to take just a moment to plug an exciting new book about AI in sales. You'll find it on Amazon and everywhere else. And, of course, on my website, the AI Handbook for Sales Professionals is, a guide to people getting started, whether you're a BDR, a quota carrier, a manager, a board member, or beyond. Mark, this half hour has just flown by so quickly, and I feel like I could just listen to you talk and teach forever and ever and ever. If folks want to connect with you after today, what's the best place to connect with you?
I post 2, 3, 4 times a week on LinkedIn, and that's usually where people get in touch with me.
Fantastic. So Mark Kosoglow on LinkedIn, Docebo. We're looking forward to exciting things coming out from your leadership. It's an impressive machine you've got built, and we can't wait to see what's next. Thanks for being with us today.
Thanks, JD. Good seeing you, brother.